So, lieben guten Morgen, Geschwister. Good morning, brothers and sisters. Happy to see you. Today I chose to speak in English. I hope you will forgive me for this. Yeah. So, sometimes when preparing a sermon, it's something, we read Hundoke and we pray deeply, and that's when we come up with a topic. This time, this topic, Imagine the Power of a United People, came to me while I was traveling home from work on the Underground. And I was standing there, and looking around me, and I can hear myself somewhere. And I was just suddenly realizing all these people around me. What if we were a united people? What if we're not strangers? And maybe this whole word of a stranger did not even exist. What would that be like? I think a good example is when we go to, let's say, an international workshop or somewhere in another country and we meet other brothers and sisters of the unification movement. We don't have a concept of stranger, or is that the case? I think most of us, we feel automatically, oh, these are not strangers and my brothers and sisters, even though I do not know them. So what if we had a world where there were no strangers? Everyone is just our brother or our sister. How different would the world really look? If we consider how society and the world is right now, it feels like we're fighting about everything, and everything is a cause for disunity or to see each other as adversaries or enemies or someone to not get along with because they belong to this political party or they think about this way or that way. It feels we are divided over so many things in the world right now. And I realized also this is something that actually makes us, the society and the world, very weak. There is a good example, I think, a story from Leo Tolstoy, who said the story that it was once a father who invited his sons, I think 2 or 3 sons, to him on his deathbed. And he asked them, can you bring me an old broom? An old broom is this kind of, thick wooden stick, and then at the end, many of these small and wooden sticks tied together, so really old-style Russian broom. Now the sons came to him and brought him this broom, and he took off the big part and just gave them these sticks and was like, okay, break this. And despite the sons trying as hard as they could not break that part. Then he told them, okay, now untie it and break them one by one. And of course, then the sons had no problem doing that. And then the father told the sons, this is exactly what you need to keep in mind when I am gone. If you are united, you cannot be broken, but if you are divided, you're easily broken. And how this looks in today's society is that society is so busy fighting over numerous things. If we read the media or go on social media, it's even worse. Everything is a cause of fighting, and in the end, we fail to tackle the real issues that we have. And the people who are in the worst position, they suffer the most from this. And even though very often we have this thinking that, if we manage to push through this political party or this law, then everything will be fixed. But so far that's not the case. And also, as we read in the Hundoke from True Father, he said, this change, this revolution cannot be attained through a political means or social reform or even an economic reform. All of these will not be working and fixing society. So what is it that we need? And True Father very helpfully gave us the answer. He said, what we need is a revolution of heart, a revolution of true, unselfish, God-centered love. I think we've all heard this before. Okay, we need to have a revolution of heart. We need to have true love, and so on. But is it easy? Who finds it easy to love with true love? Who finds it challenging to love with true love? Okay, good. Just want to share. Because no one raised their hand for the first question. I just wanted to check the mic is really on. Good. Yeah, no, it's definitely not easy being out there. And because the reality is, there are so many issues out there which are intolerable for us, some of them. And for other people, maybe something that we think seems intolerable. So, I reflected about this, how difficult it is to, really go beyond our differences and really love, despite having love greater than our differences. And, the real a good battleground that I've found is my marriage, actually. I think maybe many of you most of you, I think, in this room are married, and many of you for way longer than me, can probably recognize that this is one of the biggest battlegrounds where this becomes most substantial. Maybe not just marriage, but maybe also in our family relationships. These are the closest relationships. And, I had some discussions with Jonghae sometime. When a friend says something that we don't like, we don't mind. When the spouse says the same thing, it's a big thing. We're very upset and be like, oh, how can you do that? How can you say that? And, these things become much more agitating to us. We feel much more like, why? And this is, I think, also one of the greatest areas in relationships in our lives where we can train ourselves. We have to train ourselves. I was in Cheonpyeong for a 40-day workshop, and there one of the lecturers was telling the story, I think based on a true story that happened. There was one kind of elder Korean pastor, quite well respected and very deep, knew his stuff very well. And one time he had disagreement with his wife about something, and he argued so well. He took the principle and the Bible and everything, just hammered his wife's argument to the ground, destroyed, demolished. I am right, and really showing that he's right. And then the wife said to him, okay, you won the argument, but you lost my heart right now. And the pastor apparently in that moment then realized that sometimes it's more important to unite than to be right. And this actually, I think one of the most valuable pieces of marriage advice I've heard, actually, and that I've been trying to implement, choosing the battles, if you will, sometimes being like, is this really something I should start arguing over? And it's interesting, like, before being married, I would be extremely annoyed, for instance, by how someone takes out the toothpaste from the tube, if they're doing it from the middle instead of from pushing it from the end, and this would be something that would be really annoying me. At home, for instance, when I go to the bathroom in the evening and someone in my family has done it the other way around, I'm just like, you need to do it this way. Marriage is something you have to very quickly let go of, these kind of small things, let's call them. And I find it quite often now when we have some disagreement over things, trying to evaluate, is this something worth, making a storm over? Or is this something I can just be like, okay, fine, I don't mind, we can do it either way. Sometimes it's also bigger things, not just the toothpaste, but how do we care for our little daughter Ellen, what's the approach? And sometimes I feel like, no, I want to do it this way, but Jong is saying, no, I want to do it that way. And there's a moment of kind of being like, I want to push for my way because I have reasons to believe this is the better way. But then, sometimes just taking a moment and just 5 seconds to think, okay, I guess it could be done the other way around as well, and we can get to the same result. Anyway, let's try it the other way around. If it doesn't work, then we can discuss, to switch it. So making these choices is, for me, it was very helpful in marriage to learn to have that kind of a heart. Okay, when do I challenge something, and when do I just choose to, let's just unite, even though it's maybe from my opinion not the ideal way to go about. Maybe sometimes it's okay, instead of taking a solution that's ranked 10 out of 10, going for a solution that's 7 out of 10, but we stay harmonious. Sometimes it's good to choose those. So how can we then try to have this kind of a attitude more in other situations as well? Maybe starting with our community. We're all very passionate people about God and God's providence and building the kingdom of heaven. And, if there are 10 people discussing this, there'll be 12 different opinions on how to get to the kingdom of heaven. So, at least. So, we, I think, very often find this, some clashes of, how do we do this? How do we do our Sunday services? Or how do we organize this? How do we organize that? And I think really the key to success there is also having this kind of gentle heart, same heart that we would have for our spouse maybe, or for our child, and being like, okay, I think this would be better, discussing it, but then being ready to make compromise and being like, okay, this, having this unity is more important than being completely right about this. And it's very interesting, if we were to, let's say, we have a big discussion over how to restore Austria, and we discuss this for weeks, and finally we find the absolutely best solution, an amazing 10 out of 10 solution, but everyone has been hurt in the process, everyone is feeling like pained and wronged, then that would probably be much more difficult to actually manage that than if we found, let's say, an 8 out of 10 solution, 7 out of 10 solution, but can manage to have harmony and then realize that. So, yeah, having this heart of not focusing too much on what we disagree on, but seeing the common and valuing the person behind the different opinion more than just my opinion. And as I mentioned before, if we implement this on the level of society, we're also challenged to love people even when they completely disagree with us or are doing something that we feel is just destroying society. And I'm not saying that we should reconcile with evil, but still having the heart to really not have any hate or hatred towards people. But and this will be the key, and this is what true parents have shown us also when they visited Gorbachev or Kim Il-sung, even though they had for decades preached against the way of governing of these nations and the ideologies of these nations, when they met in person, you could call them enemies. The enemies were not, blinded. They did not see the differences. And probably, when Gorbachev or Kim Il-sung first met true parents, they were probably expecting something rather different, being like, okay, it's an enemy, but very soon they felt just like, okay, even they managed to kind of look beyond the differences and just be like, this is my beloved brother, someone who I cherish beyond our differences. And now, I feel like, when I was thinking about this, at the same time, I admit there are things going on in society which are just very difficult and something that we maybe cannot back out on. The breakdown of the family or bringing of certain relative values is something that we cannot make a compromise with and say, okay, this is fine, this is right. So how can we then manage? Because this is something that's the most important thing for some of our, ultimately brothers and sisters, sons and daughters of God out there who are thinking a certain way. I think there's I think the end result in a society is where we need to have a society where law is not dictating our values. And I think this is something we have to now fight for in the first step, that people of different sides can agree to this, that there has to be religious freedom, there has to be freedom of faith and freedom of belief, and that we cannot force values or ideologies on anyone. And this is something I think we have to fight for, and that as long as society still has these different opinions and we do not manage to convince everyone that, okay, this is the way, that the three blessings are the key to happiness, even though we are very convinced it's difficult to sometimes convince others. So what we first need to ensure is the freedom of tradition and a society where we respect different traditions, where we are respected for our tradition and no one is trying to force us or our children to think something different. Likewise, just like God, we cannot force anyone to believe a certain way. We cannot have laws which say you have to believe this way, otherwise you're kicked out. This is not the way how God has worked either. He, regardless of how much he was pained and hurt, and regardless of how much he knew that this would hurt humankind, he could not intervene in Adam and Eve's actions and in the actions of humankind since then. So I believe this is realistically one of the steps that we will need to have in the next, say, decades, that having this freedom of tradition, and then naturally those traditions which are true, which are which have eternal values instead of temporary values, will prosper in the long term, and then embrace the others as people see that this is, these people who follow this tradition are really the happiest and somehow the most prosperous in a sense. But it's a challenge still, realistically, in society, because there are people who want to force things. So how can we find a way to get people's respect for our tradition, for our faith? And even though people disagree with us, that they say, okay, you can think differently, but I don't want to harm you. I want to allow you to think differently and raise your children differently from what I believe is right. And of course, part of it is also how can we, on one hand, then, I think that'll be the first step, and then the next step will be having people really feeling, oh, actually, I also, I don't just respect, I want to be part of this community and this tradition of happy families and happy people. And I think it comes back down again to this, what True Father was talking about us becoming substantial embodiments of true love. This revolution of heart, starting from our personal relationships with our husband, our wife, our father, mother, brothers and sisters. Then, as we have these relationships in our family, we start having them in our community here. This heart of really unselfish love, of being able to, switch off our ego that's saying, I want to be recognized, I want my opinion to be the prevailing one, and instead having a humility in a sense, being like, okay, let's find harmony and let's find a way forward together. And I think this will be the first step, and then the next step of how to do this on the level of society comes from not how much we preach, but how much we reach the hearts of people in society. And when Dr. and Mrs. Balcom, our continental directors, were visiting us in Vienna in November, and they spoke to the young people, they were emphasizing this element. Considering also what's happening in Japan, where, society is trying to, some elements in society are trying to destroy our movement. He's saying how important it is for us to leave a mark in society. How can we be a community who is recognized as contributing something valuable? Where people have this first image when they, Dr. Balcom was being very brutally honest with us. If we were to completely disappear, society would barely notice it. Most people in Vienna probably would not notice it. And I don't mean to be, depressing us with this, but rather getting us to think, how can we be someone who, the first impression people have is like, oh, that's the unification movement, that's the Family Federation, that's International Association of Youth and Students for Peace, that's CARP, that's Women's Federation, it's UPF. The first thing that people associate is like, oh, I like what they're really doing something good out there. They're bringing some joy to society. And of course, an important part of this will be the, let's say, education work or the preaching and the trying to bring off the values and thoughts that we have, because they in themselves are valuable. But before people are able to fully receive this, we have to win over their hearts. And this is what True Father was giving us, Father Moon was giving as directions to, when he sent out missionaries back in the 1950s in Korea to small villages and so on. He told them, first of all, serve your village, and then teach your village. So this is something I want to maybe give all of us as a food for thought. What is something that we, maybe as individuals or we as a community, can do for society? Something where we express our love and do something that really benefits people out there, and people really feel uplifted, or we solve some of their issues. Is this something that we can do? And I don't want to now give any of my thoughts at this point, but rather I want to leave this to all of you to really think about. And I want to encourage you, in around 2 weeks, in exactly 2 weeks, as a matter of fact, we will have our community meeting. And I want to encourage you, use your God-given creativity and geniusness to think what it is that we could do. And if you feel that you've got a great idea, something that we can really touch the the heart of society with, then please write a proposal that has been sent out the form, and please submit it. And then in the community meeting, we can really maybe discuss what is something that we could do in this coming year, this year 2023, that really leaves an impact around us. And I want to also acknowledge at this that there are many people in this hall who are already doing an amazing thing and really leaving an impact. How can we do this even on a higher level as our entire community? Let's try to think about that. So, brothers and sisters, imagine the power of a united people, a united Austria. What a wonderful force for Europe or the world we could be. Likewise, imagine the power of a united community. If we are working as one, it feels almost frightening what we are able to do and what an impact we are able to make. As long as we have this, even a desperate heart to unite, to see the perspective of our Heavenly Parent, feel becoming this substantial embodiment of true love, where we see each other and all things from God's perspective, from our Heavenly Parent's perspective. And then we come and work together. That is something exciting, almost frightening, what we can do. So, brothers and sisters, this is the message I wanted to give today. So let's really look at this year 2023 with what we can do when we have the heart, deepening our hearts and working together on a deeper level, overlooking the petty little things that divide us and prevent us from working together. So with this, brothers and sisters, I want to wish you a really wonderful week and look forward to reading your proposals by email also in the next couple of weeks. So thank you very much, and God bless you all.